This week on Quadriga, Germany under pressure. New deal for Greece? Shuttle diplomacy for Alexis Tsipras. The new far-left Greek Prime Minister was on a tour of European capitals this week to drum up support from EU partners. His government wants an end to the austerity measures imposed by international lenders. His finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis, has also been making the rounds, calling for a debt restructuring program that would buy Athens more time to get its finances in shape. So far, Germany has ruled out debt cancellation for Greece, but Chancellor Angela Merkel says she's looking forward to meeting Tsipras at a Brussels summit next week. Will Berlin agree to renegotiate Greek debt? Your host this week, Melinda Crane.
Hello and welcome to Quadriga. That shuttle diplomacy this week ultimately brought two of the main protagonists in the Greek debt drama face to face as Greece's finance minister met his German counterpart. Can common ground be found? What could a new deal for Greece look like, and will it come in time? That's what we want to talk about today with three people who've been following the events very closely. It's a pleasure to welcome Ulrike Herrmann. She's a political correspondent and business editor at the Berlin daily newspaper, the Taz, and she began her career as a banker. And Friedrich Thelen is with us again. A warm welcome to you. He heads his own consulting office. For many years, he worked with Germany's business weekly Wirtschaftswoche as bureau chief in Bonn when it was capital, and later on here in Berlin. And it's a pleasure to welcome back Theodor Kouvakis. He reports freelance from Berlin on areas including European financial markets and foreign policy. He has worked with the Greek daily Eleftheroptypia, as well as for Real Media and the business newspaper Emerisia. Friedrich Thelen, last week we were hearing fairly confrontational rhetoric out of Athens. At least that's how the media in many places were interpreting it. This week, Greece is clearly signaling that it does want to talk. Do you think a workable compromise is in the making?
Well, in the American system, you would say that is the $126,000 question. I don't know. I doubt that from the point that we have seen to now there will be a compromise very, very soon because, well, there's so much argument on the side of the European community, especially what they do fear is not the cut again of, they do fear infection. There are other nations like Portugal, like Ireland, like the Spanish and the French or the Italians who would like any sort of getting down away from austerity policy, though that's what we always wanted for. So I think the government here will be rather cautious in compromising.
How do you see it, Ulrike Herrmann? Certainly in many, many other places, there's a chorus, a veritable Greek chorus of voices condemning austerity, saying it's not working. Is the viewpoint here in Berlin shifting at all? Do you think that German leaders are now prepared to make some compromises on this dogma that many people see as their work?
Well, you know, a compromise, in fact, technically would be very easy because even now, Greece isn't paying any money. I mean, it's just true what Varoufakis, the new finance minister of Greece, says. Greece is bankrupt. And right now, officially, they pay interest rates on their loans, but in fact, you know, they need new loans to pay the interest rates. And these new loans also come from the Europeans. So, in fact, the Europeans are paying for themselves, and Greece is already out of the game. So I'm very much in favor of the haircut. And I think right now...
Meaning a write-off of some of the debt.
Yeah, some of the debt, yes. Because, you know, it wouldn't harm anyone because, as I said, the Europeans pay for themselves anyway. So
well, that's your point of view, but what about the leaders here in Berlin?
Exactly.
They have not sounded eager to go along with a write-off.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not about, it's not a question of money. It's a question of symbolism. I mean, and I think that Mr. Thelen is quite correct. The question is no longer what happens to Greece. The question is more, if they have an official haircut or writing off of some debts, what will the Portuguese say? What will the Spanish say? Will everything change within the European Union? And I think that's the Eurozone. And I think that's what Mrs. Merkel fears.
Theodor Kouvakis, you were here with us last week on the program, and you were one of the first to say, look, this rhetoric is not nearly as confrontational as many people think it sounds. Now, of course, Greece is extending the signal saying we want to talk. What do you think about the reaction that the Greek leaders have been getting as they make their way from one European capital to the next? Is it in fact disappointing from a Greek point of view?
The reaction within Greece is what was expected. Many people think that they are being, giving leeway and not being stern enough. The reaction from France, Italy, we'll see Germany, and it has been that of, let's say, noble distancing. And that makes a compromise, I think, even harder to achieve. It doesn't seem that Mr. Tsipras has enough allies in Europe to pressure anybody, Germany or the Eurogroup or whomever, in order to achieve what he wants fast and effectively.
Were you, for example, surprised by the reaction in France? Many people thought, I think, that there would be more solidarity shown by French leaders than in fact was the case.
Well, before the elections, yes, everybody would expect this wave of democratic uprising to have other people follow. That is not the case at this point. That is not the case at this point. We've got lots of elections coming this year in Europe, and it will be very interesting to see, after the conclusion of the negotiations of Greece with its lenders and partners and allies, it would be very interesting to see what will happen in, let's say, Finland or Portugal or the United Kingdom in the elections.
Much more short term, we saw a reaction very quickly from the European Central Bank following talks between its head, Mario Draghi, this week and the Greek finance minister. That surely must have been a disappointing reaction for the Greek leaders, because the European Central Bank said very clearly they will not continue a special exemption that they had made, allowing Greece to basically give its own bonds as security for further loans. Friedrich Thelen, tell us a little bit about what that means, the consequences of that apparently quite strong noble distancing on the part of the ECB.
But yes, it's the policy, was the policy towards Greece to be more conciliant, more generous, and prolonging the. But that's what the new finance minister wants, that these sort of credits go forever, and with so the interest rate down to 1%, it's like it's a haircut. It's another word for the haircut. That's what the Greek finance minister also said. Well, we shouldn't use the word haircut, because that doesn't go down well in Germany or in other European countries. We need another formula. This is like the political class in a lot of countries likes to use the word, the game of words, and find new words for it. But I mean, what else did Athens expect when they first said the trias, consisting out of Eurogroup and European Bank and the international money, they were no longer respected guests in Athens. What do you expect?
The troika.
The troika,
what has been known until now as the
troika. Yeah, and if you tell them, folks, you should not land here anymore, but with your airplanes, well, do you expect these banks or part of these troika is going to say, welcome, we continue? I mean, we have Germans say, whatever you cry into, the wood comes out of it as an echo. This is part of the echo.
Ulrike Herrmann, well, go ahead.
I agree. The word haircut is a taboo for Europe, but the word troika is a taboo for Greece after 6 years of austerity. So a compromise should have another form of
you mean
helping.
Wording?
Another kind of formulation which will allow the Greeks to feel that they are respected again, not for being bankrupt, of course, but for being European citizens in difficulty.
Okay, is it a semantic issue? Mr. Thelen just
Also,
said another
politics.
wording. Would Greece be satisfied if the three entities which have been supervising the Greek bailouts under the name of the nickname of the troika, if we simply were to call them something else, sort of like the former singer Prince, who later became known as the singer formerly known as?
I think that's not exactly the point. The semantics is very important in politics. We all know that. It's mostly marketing.
It's also a Greek word.
But of what I know, what the Greek government is proposing now is to have at least a part of democratic legitimization in this governing body, which means involving the European Parliament, perhaps, or the representatives of the elected politicians.
But do you think the troika is non-elected?
Yes, absolutely. It's,
you mean the IMF is not elected? Oh, but they're all...
No. I'm talking the troika. The troika is the representatives, the unelected representatives of the ECB, the European Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the European Commission.
Yes, but all these people deciding in these units, financial units or banks, come from politics. They're elected. There's no one who comes by its own. It's just the government appointing him.
Yeah, well, they themselves are not elected, but of course, you know, as soon as Greece got money from outside, and it was decided by democratic governments in the Eurozone that Greece is going to have money. Of course, you know, one can understand that the governments wanted to have some control what happens with the money in Greece. So, and of course now, yeah, it's understandable. And now that the Greece says, well, we don't want to have the troika anymore in our country, and the ECB is part of it. Of course, it's very...
Is that what the ECB presumably is reacting to when it says we no longer see the will to reform and therefore we cannot continue with this exception?
I think no, because it's even worse. You know, they don't have the possibility to help because the ECB can only give loans if there is a kind of treaty or agreement. But Greece decided not to have a treaty anymore. They all want to renegotiate all treaties. So for the ECB, there is no longer
treaties surrounding the bailout,
and the debts Greece has to pay back. So for the ECB, in a way, it's really hard because there is no legal foundation to say, well, we just continue paying out money to Greece without there being any treaty and without Greece being ready to somehow let the troika into the country. I mean, there's no control, there's no legal basis, so what is the ECB to do? What happens, of course, is that, and I think that might be a chance, now that the ECB says, well, we won't pay any money anymore to Greece, it's not only putting pressure on Greece, it's also putting pressure on the rest of the Eurozone. Because, I mean, if Greek just went bankrupt in a very chaotic way, I mean, that is what would happen. Then it would be extremely dangerous for the whole of the Eurozone that Greece somehow drops out.
Theodore Kouvakis, this week, of course, Greek banks, several of them, have been looking very, very wobbly indeed. What does this ECB decision not to allow Greece to continue getting money via its own bonds as security, what does that mean short-term for the Greek economy, for the banks?
Short-term for the Greek banks doesn't mean much because their exposure to sovereign debt, because that's the only debt that is excluded, is something like 21 billion euros, which when used as collateral with the ECB, in order to get loans, get financing, they have a haircut of 40%. They have lots of bonds of the EFSF and other bonds, which they can fund, and also they have access to the emergency lending assistance, which means...
Which would be gone.
Which will be gone at the end of the month.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. February 28th, I believe, is that cutoff date.
Which will be gone at the end of the month. So, but that is not the problem. There's a problem that can arise even faster than that, and that could be a bank run of what is left of money in Greek banks, because we had a bank drip for the last 3 months, 2.5 months. Tens of billions of euros have gone out.
Probably a lot of those people who are living under austerity, but from those...
They don't have any money left.
They don't have money left, so it's the upper 5% of the... That is a question. Well, I mean, if Europeans look closely on the Greek constitution, they find out that by constitution, these sort of ship owners, which is the upper crust of the financial or political elite in this country, is exempt from taxes. And that has not been changed. It's still exempt.
Yeah, but we've heard that, in fact, the work that the EU has been doing with Greece to basically institutional reform, that it has been showing fruit, that, in fact, the tax system is more effective. Other European countries said this week that they will help Greece to find tax evaders and basically get that money back. Are those not steps to actually remedying some of the terrible bad governance issues that we've seen in the past?
Definitely, and that would be unfair not to say there are steps forward to be seen, but they're not good enough. Everybody said, well, the broad population is going to pay all the burden, the austerity for normal workers and the rest. The income of a Polish worker is 30% less than of a Greek worker in the same position. And Poland has worked out of it. I always come back to the point that other nations have done this. And from the Polish start, it was not very easy. And the Portuguese was almost as miserable as nobody is responsible for historical reasons, but they have come out of it. And then everybody says, why are those the only ones who've got a cut in 2012 for 122 billion euros, private owners, and now they come again. Wherever is the end? Where's the light at the end of the tunnel? And the Greek government does things which are strange. The finance minister has said 2 days ago, we are not following the regulations and treaties and contracts which the former government has with other European countries. It's against democracy. I mean, this is a very, very difficult stand to say what the former government, legally elected, democratic, did in international contexts is no longer law for us. Then you shuck off a lot of possible donors.
I didn't think they ever said they're not going to repay or stand by by their obligations. That's what Mr. Varoufakis said yesterday. And that's not the point, because even if Chancellor Merkel and Finance Minister Schäuble fall madly in love with what Mr. Tsipras and Mr. Varoufakis propose, and if they say, okay, we give you whatever you want, let's go on, Greece will have the same problem in 3, 4, 5 years, because it's a systemic problem, and within the Eurozone as it is, Greece has very small leeway to get out of the mess it has built for itself. We have built for ourselves in the last 30 years.
Let us take a look at how bad that mess is today. Let's take a look at the Greek situation and what appears to be an austerity program that has not been working.
The cuts in Greece have taken their toll. Social services have broken down. Unemployment has climbed to over 25%, and pension payouts are in doubt. The new Syriza-led government of Alexis Tsipras has taken up its work with ambitious plans. They include a freeze on a series of privatizations of ports and utilities. It wants to raise the minimum wage and put an end to endemic corruption. But how can this be reconciled with Greece's mammoth debt? What's the right way ahead for the country? That's the question that is currently dividing Europe.
Ulrike Herrmann, one of the things that many of Greece's partner countries, its creditors, have been objecting to is measures that were taken last week, for example, to rehire some public sector workers. In point of fact, cleaning ladies, maybe 10,000 or so. That was a very small percentage of the number of public sector workers who had actually been let go in the course of reform. Isn't that not actually a perfectly understandable move, given the level of misery in Greece today? 50% unemployment among the young, 25% unemployment overall. Doesn't a government have to do something in the face of misery like that?
Well, yes. I mean, it's okay that they rehired those public servants, because it is very obvious that those who were fired were those who didn't have any connection to the ruling party, to the Conservatives or to the Social Democrats who ruled before, because of course they tried to protect their own people and then fired those who weren't protected by any connections up to the powerful. So I kind of understand that those who were fired are now taken on again, because probably they are those who are the least corrupt. So in a way, it is kind of smart to take them on. And and what Varoufakis said is that they do not want to increase the number of public servants, but that they want somehow to have a look at the procedure that led to these to them being fired instead of others. But in the long run, the number of the public servants will be the same. Now, to your question about what can a Greek government do, I mean, I think that this whole idea of austerity is always misrepresented. You know, the austerity in Greece became necessary because up to then, up to 2009, Greece lived from loans from outside. The whole economic model was based on the fact that there was always new money coming in from the outside. Of course, after the financial crisis and after it became apparent that Greece would never ever be able to pay back these loans, there were no new loans coming. So that is basically why Greece is in such a bad shape, because the former growth model no longer works.
But the problem is that the new loans that are coming now, of course, as you said earlier, are simply going to service the debt. In other words, it's not the Greek people who are getting a bailout, it's the creditors of Greece, the banks.
No, in fact, if now there was a haircut and nothing would change. Because, as I said, even the interest rates that Greece pays now are in fact not paid by Greece, but by the other European countries by giving some small new loans for Greece to be able to pay its interest rates. So if there was a haircut, and I'm very much in favor for this writing down the debts in Greece, and that's the real problem, nothing, absolutely nothing would change. The situation would be just as bad as it is now. And that is something that Tsipras and Varoufakis never ever told their voters, that there is just no hope. In order to get Greece on a path of growth, there would have to be a whole new program of development aid. And that would mean new loans coming from outside. Europe would have to be ready to pay again for Greece. And that is really very difficult to somehow get through because, as Mr. Thelen said, there are some countries in the Eurozone that are poorer than Greece, like Slovakia, Lithuania, and some of them, like Slovakia, being poorer than Greece, paid for Greece. So for them, they just don't see why they should continue paying.
Theodore Kouvakis, your new finance minister, Mr. Varoufakis, he would be the first one to say to Ulrike Herrmann, absolutely right, but in fact it's not new loans we need, it's aid, it's a Marshall Plan for Greece. He's calling it the Merkel Plan. He's saying Germany needs to behave like a hegemonic power. Tell us more about what he has in mind.
We'll tell you, but I have to put one fact straight. What Syriza said, the government said, is that they're going to rehire 9,000 former public servants, 600 of them were the cleaning ladies,
exactly.
For which the Greek courts have decided that they were illegally sent away. And Greece has now 220, if I'm not mistaken, 1,000 public servants, less than it had in 2010. So it's a small proportion, and there are special cases, the ones who were sent away because they had no connection with the establishment. Now,
the Merkel Plan.
The Merkel Plan.
The Merkel Marshall Plan.
Greece needs a lot more than a haircut or a Merkel Plan. Greece needs to re-engineer the whole system. And in order to re-engineer the whole system, it has to cut away the old system, which is the crony capitalism, the oligarchs, the connections between politicians and
media.
Business. Media is also part of business, construction, shipping, whatever. It has to do that. If not, no haircut and no growth plan will help.
Is this government taking steps to do that?
We have to wait and see. But they are the first ones.
The European Community is not to give money without seeing something.
Yeah, but they have to wait and see. It's a one-week elected government. The program is going to be presented the day after tomorrow. Let's wait and see what they have to say, and let's wait and see what they can do. Because until now, everybody came in power in Greece and said, "We're going to change everything."
Yeah, nothing happened.
Okay, nothing happened. Not only nothing happened, but I have cases for which of corruption, for which Greek governments had all the data and did nothing about it. Okay, let's wait and see if this government has the guts and the power and the stamina to go on and do it.
Well, meanwhile, there isn't a whole lot of time for waiting and seeing. We just mentioned February 28th, one of the many deadlines that it's approaching, and a very, very big deadline, Damocles' sword hanging over Greece's head this coming summer, when in fact it would need substantially more money. Friedrich Thelen, this Merkel plan that is being proposed by Finance Minister Varoufakis, he actually looks at Germany's post-war situation as a kind of model. He says, look, in the early 50s, it became clear that post-war Germany would never get out from under the effects of the Second World War unless it got debt relief, number one, and number two, a very significant injection of aid. In fact, what was the biggest aid program ever, namely the Marshall Plan. Is that parallel, in fact, a valid one? Does it make sense to look at that example and say, you know, hey, we need a whole different approach here?
We do need a different approach because the trust, you said that every new government promised we redefine the world, we invent a new world. But unfortunately, 4 years ago, 4 years later, nothing had been invented. So there is distrust, and I doubt very much where you get this sort of Merkel plan. And second, a major question has to be answered. It's an Italian movie, What Went Wrong on the Way to the Forum. Something must have been wrong in Greece, different from other European countries. You mean Slovakia, you mentioned Portugal or others. Greece is a country in Europe, and it has not been under communist rule for the last years, till 1990. Never been. Well, what went wrong? You, the Greek, must explain the European public and the rest why all the money which has come into, 122 billion and the rest, why didn't it work? Why does Greek not function and other democracies?
Well, the main difference between Germany in '53 and Greece today is that Germany was a destroyed country by the war, but nonetheless it was a former export nation. So, you know, it was completely obvious where you had to put the money into. You just had to build up the destroyed industry, and then Germany just continued to function as it had functioned before.
And they got trained, skilled workers.
Yeah, they had skilled workers, they had the know-how, they knew how to export, what to produce. So it was just a question of money. And in Greece, it's completely different. Even if one wanted to invest, no one would know what to invest in, because the industry isn't there. There was industry in the 50s, in 60s, and it's all gone, either to Turkey or to Bulgaria. And there's just nothing left. And you can see that in Greece, that because no one knew where to invest money, they just built streets. And every small path to every single beach, even if there is not a hut, nothing, no one, no tourists, nothing, the street to this small beach, uninhibited, has tarmac. And there are valleys with 2 streets, despite the fact that 1 street would be enough, just because one didn't know where to put the money. So one just built new roads because there was a big construction industry, as you said, all connected to the politicians. So Greece started building streets that no one needed. And there is nothing else.
And would you agree that the situation in Greece is categorically different than the one, for example, in Spain and Portugal? It is often said that structural reform is working in those countries, but not in Greece. Why?
Why? No, I think that's for historic reasons. I mean, Greece is the only country in the Eurozone that had been occupied by the Turkish for more than 400 years. Then once...
not anymore, Bulgaria and Romania.
Yeah, but they are not in the Eurozone. That's what I said, yeah.
The European Union.
No, in the Eurozone. And then, you know, even the 20th century was very troubled, also due to for example, the Germans. I mean, we occupied the country. It was horrible for 4 years, 100,000 of deaths. Then after the Second World War, the Greeks voted democratically for a government. Unfortunately, it was a communistic government, so the CIA intervened, and the result was a civil war. So, you know, I think that Greece is really entitled to help, and I'm really very much in favor of some kind of Marshall Plan. But it must be somehow recognized that it would be something completely different than anything else the Eurozone has ever undertaken.
If I read between the lines here, Theodor Kouvakis, I'm basically hearing, yes, they need help, yes, they need debt relief, yes, they need structural reform, but none of it is going to make a significant difference, even in the medium term. Certainly not in the short term, maybe not in the medium term. It's a long, long-term prospect. Under those circumstances, can Greece really remain in the Eurozone, or do we need to face the possibility of what's called Grexit, Greek exit from the Eurozone, not the EU, not the European Union as a whole?
That is to be seen, but let me make myself absolutely clear. I have said before, I believe that Greece should never have applied to be a member of the Eurozone. It was not ready. There was no sustainable cohesion and convergence with Europe. That was a big myth. But since it is in, you can't use two wrongs that don't make one right. So we have to see what will come out of this. Let me put another dimension. 1978, 20 drachmas to the Deutschmark. 1988, 70 drachmas to the Deutschmark. 1998, shortly before the Eurozone, it was 170. The same thing was valid also for Italy, Spain, in a lesser extent, but Italy, Spain, Portugal, Ireland, and other countries. Why? Because we were net importers, whilst Germany was a net exporter. The Eurozone has no real mechanism in order to absorb this kind of permanent situations. That is something we have to see. Without that, I don't think Greece can stand in the Eurozone because it will have the same problems again in 5 years, even with a total haircut or with a shave. It doesn't matter.
But leaving the political structure aside, one could, if you are very pessimistic, say from the infrastructure, from the economy, everything, Greece is in a way a failed state. I don't talk about the political parties, not about democracy, but the rest of it is like a failed state, how to put these pieces together. Even if the rest of the Europeans are very well filled with not a lot of trust into it and not a lot of confidence. So it looks at a failed state within the Eurozone.
So what's your guess? Grexit? A real possibility?
My guess is that we have new elections in 5 or 6 months, because even the more this government gets into compromises, its own voters will be very much deceived. They say, well, that's not what we voted you into government, so he cannot fulfill what he has promised. And the less sort of the stronger austerity remains, this will be on the negative side of this government. And on the other side, he doesn't get the European help. I doubt very much because of your argument, but even if the haircut, and you call it a shave, and new detergents into the ground, it won't work. And then,
unless what they do is not only keep the austerity and clean up the public finances, but also clean up the whole system of corruption. And I'm sure that the voters, if they see that something is really happening, there will not be new elections, snap election. Okay? It's a political thing, it's not a financial thing.
In fact, Theodor Kouvakis, the finance minister, Mr. Varoufakis, he has used the German analogy in another respect as well. He has said, look, if we continue in the situation that we are in, we will not see new elections producing a moderate, middle-of-the-road government. We will see new elections producing truly extreme parties on the left and on the right. He sees, he certainly wouldn't refer to it as a failed state, but he sees a very strong potential for political destabilization. Do you think that's right?
He talked about the Golden Dawn, the neo-Nazis, and because there is no extreme left in Greece, if you don't count in the Stalinist Communist Party, which has a stable 5%, and they have no dynamics to do anything else. There is a risk of social unrest. And please keep in mind that out of the 25% of Greeks who are unemployed, only 20% of them are entitled to an unemployment benefit. All the rest have to struggle on their own.
This is the reason, of course, that Greece also took steps last week after the election to raise pensions for very poor pensioners and so on. Ulrike Herrmann, both of the other members of our group have said they don't think a Greek exit from the Eurozone is in the offing. You told us earlier in the program there's no hope of these various solutions actually working. So what is the options that out there? Would you also say no Grexit in store?
One doesn't know, but a Grexit would also be very horrible for Greece. It would not really help because, you know, Greece just doesn't have any export industry. The only export industry it has is tourism. Now, if Greece left the euro and had its drachma again, of course, you know,
it's very cheap to spend a vacation.
Yeah, but that would be the only effect. The only effect would be that it would be very cheap to spend holidays there. But apart from that, there would be nothing that Greece could export. That would also take years and years and years to develop. So it's really a kind of a very severe situation. And I think that it's very important that the whole of the Eurozone somehow gets aware of that. But not only the Europeans, but also Syriza, because they didn't tell their voters how dire the situation is.
Theodore Kouvakis, what positive New Deal could be out there? What might a new bargain with Greece look like? That, of course, the title of our program. How do you see it? And we've heard a lot of demands from the Greeks, but what would they be offering? What could they give to make a New Deal possible?
Well, the Greek people, I think they have offered whatever they had because they have the most highly taxed people in Europe. With this and that, their disposable income has gone down by 45 to 50%, actually. Unemployment is so high that you cannot expect any kind of revival, financial revival of public finances at this point. I don't know if Greece has much more to offer than trying to struggle its way out of the dire straits. And that will not happen if we go back to the old system, because then, yeah, Brexit will be the lesser of the evils.
Demands like this troika demand, for example. Finance Minister Varoufakis is so fond of the German analogy after the war. Well, Germany was an occupied country. Germany had not only a troika breathing down its neck, it had occupied powers in its country for decades.
Yes, but that was another...
Surely Greece could relax its objections to oversight by the European Central Bank, the European Commission, and the International Monetary Fund. Those are the members of the troika.
What I know that the Greek people feel, because I see it around, is that they also feel being under occupation, okay? Because that's normal. We are a bankrupt state, so we have to listen to what the creditors say. And it's not the first time that Greece goes bankrupt. It's gone bankrupt before. The power company was for decades under US control. UK control for the water system, etc., but there is no way that the situation that now exists can produce anything better than what it has up to now.
Right, which is why I want to ask again about a possible New Deal. I asked, what is Greece offering? Well, one thing it has been offering, Friedrich Thelen, is to swap debt for equity. Essentially, what it's saying is, look, we're not going to talk anymore about a haircut or a write-off of debt. We are going to offer to swap growth-indexed bonds, essentially, as for some of that debt. Now, no less an economist than the Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz has said he thinks that is a very, very good idea, together with a massive injection of aid for Greece. If it's good enough for Joseph Stiglitz, why shouldn't it be good enough for Chancellor Merkel and Finance Minister Schäuble here in Germany?
First, even Professor Stiglitz went wrong. We were not going into history, but there he committed faults, which he admitted later on. But the point is, it is a word game. The Greek they detest not the troika, the word, but they detest is the sort of the program of austerity. That's what they dislike. And it's very difficult. If you sort of read the swapping, what you describe, it's a long-term haircut. If you never pay these credits back, it's like writing them off. And then as the situation on the international markets, it's 1 or 2 or 3% for that the Greek government will be paying. But the difficulty is you won't get any new new loans, new credits. Then the community, i.e. European Union, the ECB, all the rest have to come in and give taxpayers money into it. I think it's a very, very hopeless situation at the moment, because what you analyzed is the hopeless situation of the Greek industry. Where is the hope coming on? A country cannot only live on tourism. On what else should they live?
Let me give you one fact. In 1998, 70% of agricultural products consumed in Greece were produced internally. 2010, that was 30%. Oh. The same goes for many industries, shoe industry, clothing industry. It's also global factors which go in, but, you know, why was that? Because of the pseudo idea of a free meal. Wages went up, forcibly went up in Greece after it entered the euro, and the whole thing was not working out. It was not economical to produce.
Theodor Kouvakis, very briefly, because we're almost out of time. How much time do we have to get this New Deal up and working? When does the clock run down?
Until it goes boom.
Okay. Thank you very much for being with us today, and thank you for joining us as well to all of you out there. See you soon, and undoubtedly to discuss this ongoing situation, hopefully before it goes boom. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.